It's all quiet in the underground bunker. Doors closed, locks bolted. But the Great One isn't just resting on his laurels. He's making sure your weekend is even better by giving you his best. This is the best of Mark Levin.
Why is Kamala Harris and her husband Dougie, why is Tampon Tim and his wife Broomhilda, why are they trying to pretend they're normal, average, everyday Americans at a convenience store buying Doritos? That's not who they are. Why do they pretend they're something they're not? Shouldn't they be like at an abortion clinic? Showing us the various operation rooms and how the thing works and so forth and so on. That's who they are. Or shouldn't they be like interviewing their friends, the Hamasians, a.k.a. the Hamas terrorists? Show us the Hamas healthcare ministry, who shares their numbers with Kamala and Tampon Tim and the rest of the media and the Democrats, and they spew them. Show us who these people are, this Hamas health ministry. Where are they? Where are they even located? Who's in charge of it? I mean, that's what they should be showing us, what they actually believe in. Or maybe have a party. They could have a party with all the illegal aliens they've let into the country, or all the criminals who they've let out the back door through bail. And she, of course, you'd want to include the rioters and the arsonists from BLM who she helped bail out. I mean, that's who she is. That's who they are. What's this stuff at a convenience store, Doritos? The only way she should be at a convenience store is it should be in L.A., and it should be in the midst of a robbery where people are running in and stealing everything because of Prop 47, which she promoted, which provides that if you steal anything that's $950 or less, it's just a misdemeanor. And, of course, the Soros prosecutor there, of which she was one before there was even a Soros, lets them out of prison anyway. Why don't they show us who they really are rather than, oh, we're at a convenience store, there's Doritos. And yet this is what we get. We don't get the fact that Kamala Harris met secretly with the Jew-hating, American-hating, anti-Semite mayor of Dearborn, Michigan. Did you know this, America? Are you aware of this? It's reported by our friend Joe Pollack at Breitbart. Vice President Kamala Harris secretly met last week. And why secretly? Why didn't she do it? Because she doesn't want you to know. With the radical anti-Semitic mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, in an effort to court Muslim and Arab American voters, not just any Muslim and Arab American voters, those who are supportive of or related to terrorists. Terrorists. Hamas's terrorism. The meeting was reported by the Associated Press, buried within an article published on Saturday about the so-called uncommitted group of voters, particularly in Michigan, who are trying to push the Democrat Party in an openly anti-Israel position. And they're succeeding. And they're succeeding. I saw our friend Jessica Tarloff on Fox predicted that Democrats get 70% of the Jewish vote, and they'll continue to get 70% of the Jewish vote. Is that right, liberal Democrat Jews? Is that right? None of this bothers you? It's all okay? Just curious. The AP reported top Democrats have spent weeks meeting with uncommitted voters and their allies, including a previously unreported sit-down between Vice President Kamala Harris and Mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, in an effort to respond to criticism in key swing states like Michigan, which has a significant Arab American population. Has she ever sat down with Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn, New York, Mr. Producer? Never. Has she ever sat down with Orthodox Jews in South Florida? Never. What's that all about? During a campaign trip to Michigan last week, Harris met with Abdullah Hammoud, Abdullah Hammoud, a 34-year-old mayor of Dearborn, a Detroit suburb that has the largest number of Arab Americans of any city in America. The meeting was disclosed by a person who was not authorized to discuss it publicly and spoke on condition of anonymity. Yeah. You know, doesn't want to get hurt or anything. Person familiar with the meeting didn't provide specific details, but said the focus was on Harris's potential policy if elected on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Mayor Hammond declined to comment. Well, what does that tell you? That told you she met with them. She was meeting with the anti-Semite, Jew-hating, Israel-hating mayor of Dearbornistan, while Donald Trump was meeting with Jews in New Jersey, condemning anti-Semitism, talking about the need to support Israel so they could finish off the terrorist group Hamas. Now think about the contrast. It couldn't be bigger. Harris has actually initiated her openness to a possible arms embargo. Indicated, I should say, telling anti-Israel activists she would consider a discussion on the subject before her campaign later issued a statement. All this after-the-fact campaign statement crap is irrelevant. But the news is that Harris met secretly with Dearborn Mayor Abdullah Hammoud. Hammoud posted a statement on Twitter on October 7th, in which he appeared to justify the mass murder of Israelis by Hamas, even while he claimed to oppose violence against innocent civilians. He posted Israel's decades of illegal military occupation and imprisonment of Gaza. Let's stop a second. Gaza was Egyptian. The Israelis defeated the Egyptians. Gaza became Israeli territory. Israel didn't want to keep it. Israel gave Gaza to the Palestinians, who never had any tie to that land whatsoever. It's on the Mediterranean. It's actually a beautiful strip of land, or at least was. And they turned it into a terrorist island, a terrorist territory. Israel doesn't occupy it. Israel gave it to them. Israel has trapped millions of Palestinians in Gaza in what is recognized by the international community as the world's largest open-air prison. No, it's not. But he said it nonetheless. Failure to recognize this context is the inability to comprehend what is unfolding overseas. And he goes on. Now, once again, the Gaza Strip was never Palestinian any more than the rest of Israel was ever Palestinian. It's never been Palestinian. He also gave a radical anti-Semitic speech at an extremist anti-Israel rally last November. His remarks are reported by the Middle East Media Research Institute, MEMRI. He said on November 29, 2023, the new generation of Palestine, founded by Michigan comedian Amir Zir, held a rally marking the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people in Dearborn, Michigan, which was streamed live on the organization's Facebook page. Abdullah Hammoud, mayor of Dearborn, spoke at the event. He said Dearborn is a city of resistance. He said the question is not whether his community will vote for Biden or Trump in the 2004 president election, but whether Biden listens to them or to the constituents who stuff his pockets with money. He specifically said this is the city of protests, the city of resilience, the city of resistance. That means the city of course, Hamas, among others. If American democracy depends on our current president being reelected, then why is being bedfellows with the terrorist Netanyahu worth sacrificing American democracy? And he goes on. The term resistance is used by Iran-backed terrorist groups like Hamas to refer to themselves as part of the axis of resistance. The image of donors stuffing politicians' pockets with money evokes classic anti-Semitic stereotypes, the false claim that Jews buy congressmen. Dearborn is a known hotbed of radicalism. The Wall Street Journal op-ed called it America's jihad capital. In October, just days after the Hamas terror attack on Israel, local Muslim community leaders staged a pro-Hamas Free Palestine rally within days, even before Israel went into Gaza, at which the one speaker who mentioned the word peace was booed off the stage. Harris has hired an anti-Israel liaison to the Jewish community, a liaison to the Muslim Arab communities who has a history of radical anti-Israel activism, including denying the extremist anti-Israel protests on college campuses are anti-Semitic. And as former President Trump pointed out Saturday, Harris declined to name Josh Shapiro. There's a big article on this that was in the New York Times. That by the time you muscle your way through that damn piece, they conclude in so many words that that Shapiro wasn't picked because he was Jewish. Even though Shapiro, as Michael Rappaport said, tried to un-Jew himself and is still trying to un-Jew himself. He's going to speak at this convention. Notice one other thing, America. These protesters who are pro-Hamas, anti-Jew, anti-Israel, and by the way, anti-American in a very, very big way. Notice one other thing. They didn't bother protesting at the Republican convention because there's not a Republican in the House or Senate that I'm aware of that is persuadable to support Hamas or the annihilation of the Jewish state. There are plenty in the Democrat Party. And the fact that Kamala Harris met in secret with one of the leaders of the Destroy Israel crowd, the mayor of Dearborn, in secret. She has said so many things, as I pointed out in my monologue Saturday on Life, Liberty, and Levin, who she surrounds herself with, how she's a special pleader for Iran. Is Tarloff right? 70% of Jews will still vote Democrat? I say as a Jew, if that's true, then we are suicidal. Absolutely suicidal. And by the way, I heard somebody say today that the Israelis are in favor of two-state solution. No, they're not. Since October 7th, they reject it for obvious reasons. On kibbutz, a lot of liberal Jews live. A lot of Jews who supported a two-state solution. It's not a solution. It's a final solution. But in any event, they actually had Palestinians working for them, and many of those Palestinians were going back into Gaza, telling Hamas all about the layout of the kibbutz, who was in charge of what, where the women and the children were, who had arms, and all the rest. And many of them participated in the slaughter of October 7th. So even for fairly left-wing Israeli Jews, they don't trust the Palestinians. Gee, I wonder why. But a lot of left-wing Jews in America will see the vote and will know. But they're okay. They trust them for a two-state solution because they don't live there. Do they? The marquee story here is that Kamala Harris met in secret at least once. I am told twice, but I can prove once. With the anti-Semitic, river to the sea, radical, Hamas-supporting mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, to try and get their votes. And their demand to get their votes is to boycott Israel. And I'm telling you that their influence on her is massive. She's not an empty vessel. She's one of them.
Mark Levin.
Making your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
Well, the statistics are in. You know this viscerally, but the statistics are in from our friends at MRC and Newsbusters. They do these great studies, Rich Noyes as well. Since Joe Biden exited the 2024 presidential race 4 weeks ago, the liberal networks have delivered an unprecedented boost of positive publicity to a successor in the race, Vice President Kamala Harris. Not only has Harris received 66% more airtime than former President Trump, but the spin of Harris's coverage has been more positive, 84%, than any other major party nominee. even as Trump's coverage has been nearly entirely hostile, 89%. She gets 84% positive. He gets 89% negative. As always, our calculation of spin omits so-called horse race assessments, but a separate count shows those statements have also favored Harris by a whopping margin of 94% positive versus just 43% for Trump. And at the same time, the network coverage has virtually eliminated any discussion of the strident left-wing positions Harris took as senator or during her 2020 presidential campaign. They're covering up. They're covering it all up. And while Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance and his Democratic counterpart Tim Walz have received nearly equal amounts of airtime, the networks have celebrated Walz 62% positive and punished Vance 92% negative. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Now, I'm trying to find where the ABC lady, Mr. Producer, tried to draw out of the... Let's take a look at Cut 8 here, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to talk about this because this is a perfect example of how the media conduct themselves. And ABC has been one of the worst, and of course, they're going to have their own debate. Kamala Harris refused to attend a Fox debate on September 4th. Donald Trump accepted. ABC and CBS offered Fox. She said no. So she, Miss Tough Lady, Miss Prosecutor, can't play on a level playing field. But I don't see that at Cut 6, Mr. Producer. Let me see. Okay, that's it. Lindsay Davis is going to be an ABC debate moderator. And yet I want you to listen to her yesterday on ABC News at a Democrat convention, hat tip right scoop. Take a listen to this question. Go.
As you know, former President Donald Trump is expected to go campaign in Howell, Michigan tomorrow. Many people are aware that a month ago in Howell, KKK protesters marched in the streets with the white robes on and suggested that they support Donald Trump. I'm curious if you make anything about that connection and him going in particular to Howell tomorrow.
Now, what's amazing to me about this, first of all, she's at a Democrat Party convention. The same party that 100 years ago in 1924, Madison Square Garden, had the Klan Bake, where Klansmen were marching through the streets with their white robes and their white hoods on behalf of the Democrat Party. And she's at a Democrat Party event, a party that was the Confederacy, fought a civil war for slavery, fought for segregation, refused to outlaw the Klan, promoted eugenics, including for blacks, was responsible for Jim Crow and segregation. And she dares to ask a question like this about Trump. He's in the same town where several weeks ago the Klan marched, but the town was appalled by what they did. That's why the Klan marched there. That's number one. But number two, what is this constant effort to try and tie Trump to the anti-Semites and the racists? The anti-Semites and the racists, all you have to do is turn on MSNBC and CNN and, yes, the major networks, or read the major newspapers. All you have to do, actually, is go outside of that convention site and watch the Jew haters, the anti-Semites. Take a look at them. All you have to do is look at a significant chunk of the Democrat Party, from Bernie Sanders, Chris Van Hollen, to Tlaib, Omar, AOC, and hundreds of others. And most of all, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. The fact that Kamala Harris had a secret meeting with the mayor of Dearborn, secret meeting. And she walks away, and they are left with the impression that she will, in fact, boycott Israel and prevent them receiving arms. Even though a spokesperson, often anonymously, puts out a statement and says, well, no, she believes Israel has the right to defend itself. That's not the right to victory in order to defend itself. That's a nothing line. And it turns out she's had another meeting with another group that seeks to boycott Israel and prevent them from receiving weapons. And she met with a woman, and that woman walked away with the absolute impression that she had Harris's ear on the subject and that they were going to talk more about it. Now, these are people talking about the extermination of the Jews. Why isn't ABC News interested in that? And during this entire long, monotonous speech that Biden gave, that they pushed past midnight, I must confess I didn't count, but I don't know that he mentioned the word Israel once. But he did say that he thought what the protesters are doing was, well, they have a point. Cut one, Mr. Producer, go.
We're working around the clock, my Secretary of State, to prevent a wider war and reunite hostages with their families and surge humanitarian health and food assistance into Gaza now.
Stop. It is being surged into Gaza now. The one thing you tried, your peer, collapsed. You were a failure. But the Prime Minister of Israel has explained again and again and again and again, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tons have been delivered with thousands of vehicles, and the Hamas steals it. Hamas is a terrorist organization. But Biden is a pathological psycho case. He is a liar. He lied about Charlottesville. That's what he does. He lies. He always has lied. Go ahead.
Civilian suffering of the Palestinian people. And finally deliver a ceasefire and end this war.
Let's stop a second. Wouldn't end the war, even if Israel agrees to a ceasefire. Hamas has said it's never going to end its war. Iran is building a nuke. Hezbollah is shooting missiles, and the Houthis are shooting missiles. That doesn't end this war. Just because you yell peace in our time, we must have a ceasefire. It's so insane. Anyway, go ahead.
Those protesters out in the street, they have a point. A lot of innocent people are being killed on both sides.
That's not what they're saying in the streets. The protesters have a point. Some of them are actually carrying now Hezbollah flags. The extent of anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism that is swirling around that building, swirling around that convention, swirling around the Democrat Party and the press that are there is astonishing. That's the big story. There is no story inside there. Everybody knows Harris has already been nominated. In fact, she's blowing off tonight, and she's going with the Tweedledummy. They're going to Wisconsin to campaign in the middle of a convention because she's already the nominee. They did it virtually. They did it without a single convention vote, a single challenge, a single anything. Have you ever heard of that before? You're leaving your own convention to campaign in another state? But the real story that's not being told by anybody in any significant way is the day in, day out American hatred, Israel hatred, anti-Semitic Jew hatred. In many ways, it is like 1924 at the Democrat convention. And this ABC News so-called moderator dares to raise questions about Donald Trump. It's sickening. The Israeli people, as much as we, you and I, are praying to God that Donald Trump wins. But ABC will never do that story either, nor will NBC or CBS. That is a fact. There's DNC protester at Fox News Chicago yesterday, interviewed. Cut 2, go, Mr. Producer.
Every Palestinian support Hamas, not just me. every Palestinian support Hamas.
Do you support October 7th?
Who?
October 7th.
October 7? Yes, I do. What's wrong with October 7? You tell me.
Women and children.
What?
It's a murder.
What is this?
There you go. Oh, we got to agree with the protesters, except for the extremists. They're all extremists. All of them. What's going to happen when all these colleges are back? What's going to happen? Kamala Harris meeting with the mayor of Dearbornistan, who talks about eliminating the state of Israel, which means the Jews, because they're not moving unless they're eliminated. It just amazes me. And they talk about the civilians and so forth. Israel's the only country right now in the Middle East with nuclear weapons. If they wanted to wipe the Palestinians off the face of the earth, they would have done it already. They would have done it already.
Mark Levin. You're listening to the best of Mark Levin.
I bet a lot of people are not watching this convention, and why would they? There's not a lot happening. There's not a lot patriotic happening. Rather than inspire you, it dispirits you. I got that. And most of the speeches are spent attacking Trump. Like I said earlier, they keep saying to Trump, stop attacking Kamala, which I agree with. That is her race and so forth. But for them, they can attack and do whatever they want. They call him a criminal, and it goes on and on and on, speech after speech. So why should we bother? I don't think we should. Plus, Mr. Producer has the horrendous job of having to watch it and pull clips from time to time. They had AOC on last night. They always don't think much of her. She was on Monday. Monday's for the, the riffraff. Biden and AOC. But there's nothing magical that's happening there. Everything's already set up to go as they plan. You're going to have a candidate for the Democrat Party that they want you to vote for who never received a vote by anyone for anything. Because that's what the Democrat Party has become. They'll accuse you of voter oppression, suppression, repression. Well, that's exactly what they do. That's exactly who they are. I want you to hear some of this because I want you to hear what a completely crazed head case Joe Biden is. Well, where should we start? I think yeah, I know, but there's so many. I don't want to overwhelm the audience and get them upset. Let's start this way. Let's start with cut 23, Mr. Producer. 23.
America's winning, and the world's better off for it. America's more prosperous, and Americans are safer today.
First of all, America is not more prosperous or prosperous. But just keep listening to the way he lies, and listen to the way he delivers a speech. Like some cartoon character on TV, Go ahead.
Trump continues to lie about crime in America, like everything else. Guess what?
Well,
on his watch, the murder rate went up 30%, the biggest increase in history. Meanwhile, we made the largest investment, Kamala and I, in public safety ever.
Let's stop. John Lott has pointed out what a bald-faced lie this is on the statistics. How they don't keep the statistics, how they've been pleading down major felonies to misdemeanors or pleading them out altogether. And so this doesn't show what exactly is taking place in our country today. Nobody thinks crime is going down in this country other than the propagandists for the Democrat Party, including the media. Everybody knows it's not going down. And when you bring in tens of millions of people, 12 million of whom you don't even know who they are, including MS-13, Venezuelan gangs, pedophiles, and others, crime's not going down. Crime is going up. When you see what's going on in L.A., in New York and Philadelphia, the outright theft, the brutality. We see with our own eyes. The government is lying. Biden is lying. That's what he does. He's a liar. That's why I don't want you to have to sit through the whole damn thing. Go ahead.
Now, the murder rate is falling faster than any time in history.
The murder rate is falling faster than any time in history, America? And he says that from Chicago? This guy's a clown. I'm thrilled he's leaving. I just wish he would take her with him. Go ahead.
Dropped to the lowest level of more than 50 years. And crime will keep coming down when we put a prosecutor in the Oval Office instead of a convicted felon.
Oh, a prosecutor instead of a convicted felon. You know, I do believe if Donald Trump becomes president that they should pursue Joe Biden. I really do. And I believe this out of justice, that we cannot have a man who's president of the United States, who's bought and paid for, and his family's bought and paid for by not just foreign governments, but by foreign enemies, whose family violated FARA. More and more comes out. His family didn't pay their taxes. He who violated the Espionage Act, not Trump, he who violated the Espionage Act, he needs to be investigated and he needs to be prosecuted. If they're going to play that game, Hillary Clinton did the same thing. She should have been spending time in prison for 20 years. She already has the pantsuits. They didn't need to give her any new ones. Her flagrant violations of federal law. And then, of course, Bill Clinton, whose flagrant violation of a court order, which is criminal contempt. I mean, you would have to wrap a crime tape around that Democrat Party convention. But if they're going to keep using it for politics, and I think the only way to stop it is to counter it with the same approach. So let me make it clear. I don't speak for Donald Trump. I don't speak for J.D. Vance. And I'm certainly not going to put them on the spot. But God willing, they'll get elected. And I'm going to encourage them from this microphone to examine the behavior of Joe Biden, his use of secret information, and consider whether to charge him, to appoint a special counsel, to write up a report, a new one. One already wrote up a report that was pretty damnable. Because the Democrats like to talk about convicted felons. Okay, fine. Go ahead. Next one, please.
This will be the first presidential election since January 6th. On that day, we almost lost everything about who we are.
We didn't almost lose everything. Unbelievable. We almost lost everything on January 6th. How so? How so? What took place on January 6th almost brought the country down? No, it didn't. And, of course, why doesn't he talk about the role of the Democrat Party leadership and their failure to accept the National Guard? Of course. In the streets, we have people supporting terrorism. In the streets, we have murders. In the streets, we have illegal immigrants who are raping and brutalizing our families. In the streets, we have criminals with long records because the Soros Democrat Party prosecutors won't prosecute them. And if they are prosecutors, the judges let them out. And he says we've also lost America. Ladies and gentlemen, we are losing America. But not because of January 6th. Because of that party. Because of that party. Go.
And that threat, this is not hyperbole.
All right, that's enough of that. That's enough of that. Then he wants you to know that they save democracy. They save democracy as they talk about wage and price controls, open borders, changing the citizenry. As they talk about the power to impose their will on you, whether it's what you charge for rent, when you wear masks, how far you'll be from your fellow citizen, when you come out of your house. They're going to talk about democracy. When they just blew off 15 million voters and now have appointed Kamala Harris, who they hope will be their president. Democracy, they say they support. Cut 25, go.
All of us carry a special obligation.
You know what? Shut up, you idiot. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do it. I came here. I said, let me use this as a foil and deal. I'm not going to do this to you. I'm not going to do this to you because it's too repulsive. It just is too repulsive.
Mark Levin. The Great One makes your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the Democrat convention. I'm watching all the reportage on it, including the enemy channels, where they're literally slobbing all over each other. They need to wear bibs. The spittle is so constant, flowing like a river out of their orifices. They're so excited. Ladies and gentlemen, Kamala Harris is already their nominee by default. She was their nominee 10 days ago. They did it virtually. There was no convention when they nominated her. She hasn't received a single vote, not one, for the nomination for President of the United States. Yet this party is going to install her, has installed her, and now is having a big party that they installed her as their nominee. After the convention, you'll have a choice between voting for somebody, Donald Trump, who actually received votes from American citizens and won the nomination fair and square, and Kamala Harris, who never received a single vote from a single American citizen for president at any time. Now, this is fundamental because you have a conga line of buffoons, grifters, political hacks, Marxists who are millionaires who preach poverty. You've had the Obamas, they were on in the phony duet, and they're not alone. You have a Democrat Party that is the most fascistic party this nation has ever seen in terms of its operation. In terms of its operation. And you know what? Many people are perfectly fine with it. So this is not a nominating convention. She's been nominated. They changed the rules. They brushed off Biden, who's somewhere in California now, shuffling around. Probably have a leash on him to make sure he doesn't get too far, you know. That's what they did. This whole thing is a farce. This whole thing is phony. It's like a fiction. It's some kind of a movie. Obama gets up there, the Mr. Obama, claims, he's the best friend and everything, stabbed him in the back 1,000 times. Didn't want him as the nominee the first time, helped broom him the second time. And the Obamas hate Dr. Jill. Not a word about Dr. Jill. They hate Dr. Jill. And yet you're supposed to believe it's all pretty copacetic. They have up there Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, a Marxist Islamist. He's not even a member of the Democrat Party. He's a member of the Democrat Socialist Party. That's okay. It's a big tent there. Leninists, Trotskyites, Maoists, Stalinists, whatever. That's their tent. Joe Biden droned on for hours. Not once did he mention the word Israel. In fact, Barack and Michelle never mentioned the word Israel. In fact, Hillary Clinton never mentioned the word Israel. Why is that? They used to, decades ago, but not anymore. We know why that is. We know exactly why that is. And, of course, they'll have Josh Shapiro, as Michael Rappaport said, who's tried to un-Jew himself, and now they'll put him up there and he'll be screaming at the top of his lungs. They'll present him as an example of why they're not anti-Semites. You know, he's a useful idiot. And there's the husband, whose law firm represented the PLO, as I understand it. Another useful idiot. But we know the policy. She's meeting in secret with Islamists who talk about the destruction of Israel, talk about cutting Israel off while it's surrounded. Oh, yes. All this stuff on TV and radio, this whole convention, is not about your reality. It's not about what you face, what you confront. Harris supports the destruction of women's sports. She can talk about abortion all she wants. And it is problematic, I think, that when we have conservatives on radio and TV, they don't talk about this enough. Women's rights is about more than abortion. Women's sports has been fought for half a century. The 1972 Education Act that amended the Civil Rights Act was to ensure that women were treated like women and that they had equal access to sports and funding for sports. And so Biden sought to destroy it. The Supreme Court just ruled 5-4 no. 5-4 with Gorsuch, who's very, very strange on this issue. Very strange. I assume a member of his family might be affected. He always throws in with the radical left on this issue and solely this issue. But 5-4. Kamala Harris does not support women's sports. She's destroying women's sports. Kamala Harris does not support a mother's right to make decisions about her child. Whether it's what kind of books they read in government schools, what they're taught about sex in government schools, about indoctrination on CRT in government schools. And she picked somebody, a governor, the most radical governor in this country, Tampon Tim, who doesn't believe parents should have the final say on whether their children should be sexually mutilated, either by surgery or medicine or not, if the state decides otherwise. Does that sound like somebody who supports women's rights? Kamala Harris supported the appointment of Jackson to the U.S. Supreme Court, who won't even define what a woman is. Does that sound like somebody who supports women's rights? We allow the Democrats and their party to say they support women, but they don't support women. You know what else they support? The draft, which is to include girls, women. Women in the draft. They support that too. Is that supporting women's rights? They're weak on crime. They're weak on crime. Well, in the rape statistics, overwhelmingly, who is it that gets raped and by whom? Women by men. Girls by boys. So when you're weak on crime, when you're busy contributing to organizations that provide bail to criminals, when you support Soros prosecutors, as she was a Soros prosecutor before there was a Soros prosecutor, when you're weak on crime, when you appoint activist judges, how is it that you can be for women's rights? She's not for women's rights. She's a Marxist Islamist. She backs Hamas against Israel. She uses Hamas's statistics. If she cuts off Israel, Hamas wins. Hezbollah wins. The Houthis win. Iran wins. The Islamists win. How do they treat women? How does Iran treat women? What does Iran do to girls that don't cover their heads with scarves? They torture, rape, and murder them. So how is it that Kamala Harris stands for women's rights or the rights of young girls? Open borders. We have the worst slavery situation in our country since the end of the Civil War. Women, girls, little boys, mostly of color, sold into sex slavery, sold into pornography. Open borders. The border czar who pretends not to be the border czar. But she is vice president of the United States. She can speak up. She can influence policy. And she has. She supports open borders. She opposes the Border Patrol. She opposes ICE. And the consequence? Women sold into slavery like never before. And children sold into slavery like never before. Labor slavery and sex slavery. Mostly people of color. Is she for women's rights? No, she's not. She uses women as she uses everyone else. That's what Marxists do. That's what they do. Price controls will destroy every supermarket, every grocery store in this country. The shelves will be empty. The prices will be through the roof. Is that women's rights? I'm just curious. Driving up the price of fuel with a war on fossil fuels, wanting to effectively nationalize our oil companies. Is that women's rights? That women have to pay more for gasoline? What about single women? Now, I have to confess, when it comes to abortion, nobody has a more radical position than Kamala Harris. Abortion right up to the last minute. Well, that even doesn't sound like women's rights. What do you mean, Mark? I assume that includes aborting little girls. That's right, aborting little girls. Have you ever seen a documentary of how you abort a baby in the last trimester? How about in the last week before birth? How about right before birth? Have you ever seen one? No, you haven't. Do you know how gruesome that is? What is it that you're actually removing? Killing and then removing. Use your mind's eye. Use your imagination. A brand new baby that is removed from the womb, dead. It is killed in the womb. The difference of centimeters. Can we at least agree that that is monstrous? Can we at least agree that it is Hitlerian? Can we at least agree on that point? Can we at least start from the birth and move our way back? Can we at least agree on that? Well, Kamala doesn't believe a mother or parents should be involved in the decision-making. How do you know, Mark? Because she appointed as her running mate Tampon Tim. And he believes abortion at any level, at any time, without parental notification. You watch this Democrat convention. It's a clown show. Everybody's excited. Everybody's joyous. This is pathetic. This is grotesque. This is a party that is cheering somebody as a candidate for president who never received a single vote, who had a coup against the individual who did get a single vote. This is a party that doesn't believe in the American system, doesn't believe in the electoral system. This is a party that will use race, that will use sex, that will use class warfare, that will use anything it has to for power. For power.
Mark Levin. We're giving you nothing but the best of Mark Levin.
On Radio Free America. Gather around your radio, ladies and gentlemen. Gather around your iPhone, your Android. If you're in the car, turn up the volume. If you're at the dinner table, put down the silverware. Whatever you're doing, let's have a talk. If somebody wants to be president of the United States, they have to earn it. They're not handed it. They're not handed it. You want to be a quarterback, you're not handed it. You want to be the most powerful person in a business, you're not handed it. You want to win the Teacher of the Year award, you're not handed it. You want to be rich, you're not handed it. You want to be famous, you're not handed it. You don't get the presidency handed to you by hiding from the voters. You don't hide behind a corrupt media, Democrat mouthpieces, and campaign surrogates. Men and women have fought for the right to vote, and they have died. Men and women have fought for representative government, and they have died. The founding of this nation, the revolution, was over representative government, the right to vote, the right to choose the people who will serve in the government. The right to choose the people who will serve in the government. You don't have a right to hide from the voters and the citizens. This isn't about you and your party. We're not interested in what your mouthpieces and your surrogates have to say. We're not interested in what the media have to say. We're not voting for them or against them. You want to be president of the United States? You don't get to camouflage your views. You don't get to talk through spokespeople, press releases. You need to mix it up. You need to meet the people. You need to be clear and precise about what you believe, what you're going to do. You need to explain yourself. Kamala Harris, who the hell do you think you are? To disrespect the American people, all the people. To hide behind shibboleths. Or you're the first potential woman president, the first potential black woman president. You don't get to hide behind race, hide behind sex, hide behind the media, hide behind billionaire oligarchs who are funding your campaign. You want to be president of the United States? That's president of all the people. Act like it. Act like it. If you want to nationalize our healthcare system, come out of the fog and say it to our faces and explain yourself. If you want to nationalize the drug companies and snatch their patents, then come out of the fog. We have a right to know. That affects us. You want to control food prices? Then defend your position. You don't get one shot and then you run away. You're anti-cop, anti-border patrol, pro-criminal, supported a bail outfit that literally bailed out murderers and rapists. We have a right to hear from you now, right now, before we vote. Right now. What do you mean you want a 25% wealth tax or an ownership tax? Explain yourself. Explain yourself to Americans who own homes or small businesses, who want to know what that's going to do to them, or even big businesses whose employees want to know how that's going to affect them. You don't get to play hide and seek, rope-a-dope, catch me if you can. You're running for president of the United States. People in this country have fought for the right to vote. We've had a civil rights movement, a successful civil rights movement, to eliminate Jim Crow, poll taxes, literacy tests, to eliminate racist voting rules that prevented people from voting. Voting isn't a simple mechanical act, a ministerial act. Oh, I get to vote. Why is it important to vote? The act itself doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything for Hamas. It doesn't mean anything for Putin. It doesn't mean anything for Un and Xi and the legacy of Castro and Maduro. Vote, so what? Voting only matters if it matters. That is, voting only matters if you know what you're voting for or against. What kind of cockamamie campaign is this? You have an individual who, more than any other candidate ever running for president, has an obligation to present herself to the American people, since she's been nominated in a process that is the most undemocratic process in American history. In American history. The Biden campaign in 2020, they pulled this stunt. They pulled this stunt. The uniter, I'm going to save democracy. I'm not Trump. The most radical president. The most radical policies in American history. By Mr. Moderate, centrist, I'm going to unite the people. The Democrats figure it worked once, it'll work again. And they might be right. But this is spitting in the face of the greatest republic on the face of the earth. This is spitting in the face of the civil rights movement. This is spitting in the face of 1776. Representative government. Representative government means voting for people who share your principles and beliefs and values. They're smirking at us in Washington, D.C. They're laughing at us in Washington, D.C. They know exactly what they're doing. The Democrat Party oligarchs, the billionaires and the millionaires, the dark money, they know what they're doing. The media corporations and their employees with their faces on TV, their voices on radio, they know exactly what they're doing. Just because you vote doesn't make it a democracy. Ask the people in North Korea. It's a democracy when you have a vigorous campaign, when the issues are laid out, where you reveal rather than conceal what it is you actually want to do. If your policies are so unpopular, then you're going to lose. The only reason Kamala Harris is running a campaign like this is her policies, many of them are un-American. Anti-law and order, anti-Supreme Court, anti-border, anti-capitalism, right down the line. Secret meetings with Islamists. There's a large percentage of the population who are not tuned in and will never be tuned in. They've been indoctrinated either by their family, by the press, whatever it is, to vote a certain way no matter what. They've been lied to about the history of the Democrat Party, which is an evil, inhumane, contemptible history. Kamala Harris doesn't get to hide from us. She doesn't get to spring her policies on us should she win, God forbid. That's not democracy. That's not republicanism, small r. You don't get to say, vote for me, and then you'll find out what I believe. Like the evil fool Nancy Pelosi insisted when it came to Obamacare. We are a free people. We are an engaged people, many of us. We're an educated people. If not formally, it doesn't matter. We're smart. We have common sense. We've been through a lot of elections, and we've been through a lot. And we want to know, here and now, what Kamala Harris is going to do to our health care system. We want to know here and now what she's going to do to the availability of food and those who produce it. We want to know here and now what Kamala Harris is going to do on our border, if she's going to give illegal alien citizenship and Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. We want to know now, before we vote. Not after the fat lady has sung. You have to earn the presidency. You don't get to create images. I see the media's telling us this is going to be a historic speech tonight by Kamala Harris. How do they know it's going to be a historic speech, Mr. Producer? Because it's going to be given by a woman who is black, the first nominee of a major party who's a woman and black. They're not going to talk about how she became the nominee. They're not going to talk about her rope-a-dope campaign. They're not going to talk about what she has said in the past and how she's concealing it today. Doesn't matter. That speech is historic no matter what. The party and media pronouns, all of a sudden, they're into women. I'm sick of the propaganda. I'm sick of the brainwashing efforts. I'm sick of the racialism. I'm sick of the sexualism. I'm sick of it. Everything but substance. Everything but facts. Everything but reality. All these things that are going to affect your lives and the survivability of this nation as a free nation, they're concealing from us. You have to earn the presidency. You don't just walk on the field and say, look at me, I'm joyous. And we know she's not even joyous. 92% of her vice presidential staff resigned. They were leaking like sieves. Some of them on the record, some of them off the record. She's apparently hateful, angry, a yeller in person, dumping, using the F word on her staff. You don't get any sense of that during this so-called convention. Let me ask you a question. You're smart. What have you learned during the course of the last 3 days that you didn't know before? You learned nothing. You've seen dancers. You've seen singers. You've seen politicians. You saw the Obamas, who every 4 years pop up, give their Marxist claptrap, and then go back to making millions. What did you learn? What have you seen? Nothing. Zero. This is a Potemkin convention. What's that mean? A phony convention. She's the nominee. They made her the nominee 2 weeks ago by virtual voting. Never done in American history. They didn't do it because there's COVID or a pandemic. They did it because they didn't want a debate on the floor of the convention. They didn't want a challenge from a Kennedy or a Stein or anybody else on the floor of the convention. She's been handed this. And you haven't learned anything more since, and if they have their way, you won't.